right, how's everybody doing? All right, everybody stand up. We got to stand up. Come on. There's money involved, stand up. There's money involved, stand up. All right, if you're a LucidWorks employee, sit down. All right, we paid for your trip here to Dublin, so you can't win the prize. All right, let's see. Where's the guy who was running Solr 1.4 last night? Is he here? Anybody? There was a guy who asked at the Stump the Chump question last night who was running Solr 1.4. Where is he? Not here. Aw, too bad. He would have won a prize for that. Anybody else running Solr 1.4? All right, awesome. That shows you that Solr has been working for a long, long time. In fact, I know customers who have millions, hundreds of millions of documents in Solr 1.4. That's pretty cool. And they rolled all their own distributed search, everything. All right, anybody running version 2 or less, sit down. 2 or less. How about 3 or less? If you're on version 3x or less, sit down. All right, there's a few of you. All right, this is pretty cool. Most people are on 4. Very good. If you have less than 1 million documents, sit down. All right. Come on, we'll get you some more content. Less than 100 million. There's a few of you. This is good. All right, let's go up another. How about less than 1 billion? We got 1 left. All right, is there 2 left? How many we got? We got 2. All right. Let's see. Which one of you has a higher QPS? What's your QPS? Very low. What's yours? Same. All right. Are you less than 10 billion? Less than 100 billion? Or what's your? How many docs? Well, how many do you have? 50? Where are you at? 60 billion. We have a winner. 60 billion documents in Solr. Awesome. Thank you very much. Very cool. I guess it does scale. In fact, I've heard it scales linearly. Pretty cool stuff. So what I want to talk about today is 10 keys to Solr's future. But what I'm going to start off with is, where are we now? What have we got in here? This stuff has been cranking for a long time. We heard Solr 1.4. We've got 60 billion documents over here. We've got some pretty cool things that have been baked into Lucene and Solr 4 for a long time now that hopefully many of you are already taking advantage of. Biggest thing I think of these days compared to when I first started working with Lucene and Solr is that releases were very unpredictable. I think many of you probably would agree we're almost releasing too often now, but that's a good thing. We're getting releases out on a regular basis. We're getting 4X. I think we're on about 4.6 coming any day, any week. From what I've seen on the mailing list. We've got Solr Cloud up and running. We've got very large installations going on. We've got a lot of capabilities around how you want to distribute your workloads. We've got some cool new faceting things like pivots, etc. We've got some great donations from Bloomberg around analytics and extensions of the stats component. We here at LucidWorks have also launched the first ever Solr marketplace. So if you haven't checked this out, one of our missions at Lucid really is how can we complement and extend all the great work the community is doing in Solr. And so one of the ways we've done that is by creating a marketplace where people like you who have products that are built on top of Lucene and Solr can come and be a part of that marketplace. So as part of that, we've done a few on our own just to seed it. We have a relevancy workbench, for instance, that allows you to compare side by side, do diffs around search results, etc. Lets you play with things like what are your boost values, etc., and see how that affects your results. And we're going to continue to invest in that in terms of really building out an experiment management framework that really helps you understand relevance, etc. We've also added in there things like business rules capabilities because we've heard repeatedly from customers that they want to be able to better express business logic as part of their search. We've also complemented that then with our own named entity recognition framework built on top of open source tools like OpenNLP, as well as the ability to provide your own rules, et cetera, for extracting things like people, places, organizations, et cetera. We've also then put in some solutions You heard yesterday from Will Hayes, our Chief Product Officer, coming from Splunk. One of the first things he did was we recognize that a lot of our customers actually are running Splunk in their IT. How do we make Solr easier to monitor in those situations? So essentially you can feed data from Solr, all your log data from Solr into Splunk. But we've gone a step further here, which I think is pretty interesting, is we actually allow you to do data joins between Splunk and Solr. So for instance, if you're seeing on your network that Will Hayes is constantly logging in and logging out, et cetera, you could actually tie that to your user database or something in Solr and do joins to find out more information about who that person is, as an example of one of those data joins. So that's things we've been doing at LucidWorks. I also want to call out a few of our partners who are also sponsors of this conference. So for instance, Semitex, who you can talk to upstairs, has a cloud-based solution for monitoring Solr, also monitors things like Hadoop, Kafka, etc. Has integration with LogScene, which I believe is a log analytics toolkit that they've built. And it also has integrated alerting, so when things are maybe not as happy as they should be, you can go and get alerts in there. And you can also customize your dashboards. And I believe they have some other products in our marketplace as well. Another one of our partners, and again, thank you to our sponsors, DocuMill provides a visual search interface on top of Solr. So that basically allows you to do things like preview your documents, share and reuse your capabilities, visually explore your search results, evaluate result set relevancies, things like actually taking action on your findings so you can share with your colleagues, etc. Basically helping you get to your value faster. Last but not least, one of our third sponsor here, Search Technologies. One of the things they have in the marketplace is a content processing framework. Essentially, you can think about it as a pipeline. This allows you to get content from places like a database, et cetera, do transformations on that, overlay security, and then do query processing and administration of all of that. Another partner of ours is Zoom Data. I like this one in particular. I think it's pretty interesting from the fact that what you're starting to see more and more of in this space is people really using search to drive business intelligence, really being able to give the power of search to people who can then go and visualize this stuff. So these tend to be business analysts, et cetera, not necessarily developers. Build really nice charts and maps and heat maps and all of that kind of stuff that really helps you visually understand your content. So if you're interested in that, check out Zoom Data as well. I'm also happy to announce we've been working on this for a while, and I think a number of you in the room here probably have problems with logs. You want to deal with logs at large scale. We've actually taken Logstash, which is a nice another open source project that deals with logging. We've converted that to use all Solr. So you can basically get a pre-packaged version of Logstash working with Solr and go and deploy that in your environment and start to do log analytics and log processing on all of your logs, regardless of whether that's Solr or not. So that's all well and good. That's where we are. But where should we be going? This is something in my role as CTO I like to think about a lot. It's really been interesting because I think search has really evolved in the last few years. When I first started in search, I think my first job was doing cross-language information retrieval. I had users who were typing in English, and I had documents that were in Japanese, and we were essentially using machine translation to pivot between the two languages. A really hard problem, but a lot of fun to work on, not solved by any stretch. Whereas when I look at search today, it's gone well beyond keyword search. In fact, if you were at my talk yesterday, I hopefully seeded you with some ideas of other things you can do around things like recommendations, machine learning, et cetera, right? So what I've done is actually compiled what I think are my top 10 items that I think are critical to this community, critical to moving the project forward, moving search forward, et cetera. Some of the things are things that we are very heavily investing in at Lucid, so you'll be seeing these things in literally weeks or months coming forward. Other things are a little bit more pie in the sky, if you will, things that I think it would be great if this community took on and invested in and figured out. So with that, I'll start. Number 10. Real true first-in-class multi-tenancy. You see this time and time again. Solr already has cores, and you can load up multiple cores per Java instance, right? And that gets you a certain level of multi-tenancy, and people have overlaid their own capabilities on there. But I think one of the things we're investing in is really blowing the doors off of that, making it easy to load and unload cores, make it easy to lazily load them, make it easy for you to understand how many cores you can have in each process, and then also make it easy for you to move them around so that if you have a noisy neighbor, as it were, which is one of the downsides, of course, to living in a large apartment complex, you can move out or we can get that person kicked out and move them off to their own so that you can avoid denial of service things. I think also really interesting is when you start to look at the really large search indexes out there, the internet search level. One of the things that I've seen them do that's really interesting, I think fits in with this notion of multi-tenancy or at least better multi-core support. I don't know the official name for it, so I just made it up. I call it a shadow core. And the idea behind a shadow core is that you actually have two cores that roughly contain the same content, right? The one core is smaller than the other core, however. And in that smaller core, what you're putting is all your best documents. These are the ones that you know when the stuff hits the fan, that these are the documents that are going to return the key results for your users, right? And then in the other core, we have a much larger one which contains all the rest of the documents for that shard, right? And so what you can do then, and the reason why we do that is because in the bigger core, you actually have better statistics. So you get better relevancy, but of course there's that trade-off of it takes longer. So what you see in large internet search companies, for instance, is they keep these two things both ready and able to serve, and then when you get capacity peaks, you actually switch to that smaller core automatically, and therefore you're serving just your best documents. Because, hey, it's better to at least stay up and stay running than it is to fall over. So I'll give a little bit on relevance in favor of staying up and running. Number 9, I think you're finding more and more people are doing more and more interesting things in the index. When you think about what a search index is, right? We've got this great vector space model, or if you're using some of the probabilistic models, you've got essentially all of the math you need in the index to do some interesting things. And so I think we need to be powering more and more analytics out of the search engine. We can also power more and more machine learning. So for instance, I was talking with, I was at the Special Interest Group and Information Retrieval Conference this summer, talking to an academic at CMU who was actually building classification models, et cetera, right out of the Lucene index. And the reason he was doing that was just kind of actually a simple no-brainer. It's like, I've already tokenized all of this content. I already have all the features selected that I want. Why should I go reprocess that content in some other engine when I've got search and I want search, and the stuff is already there? Why don't I just go and do that? So I think we need to make that stuff easier. I think we need to make it easier for you to slice and dice that data. So I think you're going to start to see more and more aggregation capabilities, roll-ups, joins, et cetera, grouping. I think there's some patches out there for distributed processing capabilities like MapReduce, et cetera. Essentially this notion that given some document set that you've identified through your query, let's start to look at the bigger picture around that content right in the index, because we can do that pretty well. May not be as fast as search, but in these situations, you don't always need it to be as fast as search. You just need the right kind of answers. We've heard a lot of feedback. Solr isn't easy. Solr isn't this, whatever. I think thinking about what easy means to me and what we see in our customer base, first off, obviously I'm biased. I think it is actually quite easy to get up and running. And in fact, we've got some tutorials coming that will help new users get up even faster. But I think when I think about what easy means, there's a couple of different levels. Obviously, your first experience with a search engine should be a good one. We should make it like what Steve Rowe has been doing and others in the community have been doing to add in schemaless features, capabilities, so you can just start throwing data at. In our LucidWorks search product, for instance, we have data sources so that you can just start bringing in Twitter data, whatever you want. We try to make all of that stuff easier as your first experience. But I think it also goes beyond that. I think you want to think about what makes it easier for a developer to get going on this after that first week. Because if you're just making your selection on how good a technology is by that first week, you're probably missing a whole lot of things. How do we make sure we educate people on what the rest of that 6-month project is going to look like, or the rest of that 3-month project, or however long your project's going to take? So how do we make it easier for you, the developers, to understand and build out this stuff and integrate it in with your application, right? And then finally, and I think this is really one of the things that we see time and time again, how do we shorten on the back end? So it's one thing to be easy up front with your getting started. It's a whole nother thing to realize that if your engine isn't easy on the back end when you're actually going into production, we all know Solr is very, very stable, very, very effective and scalable. We've got customers who have repeatedly reported to us that this stuff linearly scales, that it does not go down in production, et cetera, et cetera. But one of the things they often struggle with is, how do I go from my dev environment to my QA environment to staging, production? This is where things like, when you're in a version control system, you want to make sure that you have well-defined workflows in place that make it easier for you to move not only your configuration, but also your data. How do I make sure I've got the right index deployed in production? How do I make sure I understand what production is doing, and so on and so forth? All right, a little bit of an eye chart. Any Doctor Who fans in the audience? Come on, it's not just me, especially when we're over here. All right, I like to always have a Doctor Who reference because it's like my son and I's favorite show. So one of the great moments in Doctor Who is where the good doctor explains time. And I'll just simply read this out. People assume that time is a strict progression of cause to effect. But actually, from a non-linear, non-subjective viewpoint, it's more like a big ball of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff. So why do I bring this up? Why is this guy up here quoting Doctor Who and acting all crazy about time? I think we can do better about time in the index and in search. Okay? A lot of you, for instance, are sorting by time, or at least boosting by time, and there's function queries that allow you to do that. But I think there's other things that you can do with time. For instance, there's a lot of really great work out there on time series analysis, etc. And some of those techniques actually can be done very effectively in the search index. If anybody's interested, I've got a great paper reference that I think would be a really good thing to put into Lucene and Solr and make for more effective time series analysis. And I think there was somebody who had a question at Stump the Chump last night about version control of the index. Is that person here? So actually, if you go and look at SIG-IR 2012, there was a really nice paper on what they call index maintenance of time travel indexes. And the whole idea here, and this is actually a common one, especially in government and in finance, where you have to deal with compliance issues, right? So one of the things that often comes up in that situation is, who knew what when? Right? And so one of the things that you want to do is you can look at what was in the search index at what point in time. And actually the mechanics of this, I believe, are already in Lucene through the way we handle segments and merge policies and all of that. Somebody just needs to overlay on top of this the right APIs and the right way of thinking about how to do this kind of stuff. Right? So that you can then start to ask questions efficiently of a time travel index. What did this index have 3 years ago? What did it have 2 years ago? How do we effectively deal with the size and shape of those kind of indexes? How do we not store the same content over and over again? How do we deal with versions and diffs and all of those things and effectively query across all of those things? I think we can make this stuff a whole lot easier. There's a lot of academic research on this that we can bring to light and make really, really fast. Number 6, I couldn't find a nice slide for this other than cheesy clip art puzzles. Modularization, I think this is one of the key things around Solr that needs to happen. I think we need to move closer to Lucene. I think we need to refactor some things to make them more testable as standalone pieces. So this is a really low-level Solr code kind of issue where I think we really need to take this up a level and make it easier for people to test these individual pieces, things like faceting, things like highlighting, things like suggesters. We need to have better unit tests for these things. We have a lot of unit tests already, but they tend to be at the integration or functional testing level. I think we need some lower level tests for Lucene. I think all of this modularity then makes it easier to have more flexible deployments, right? Because what I've seen time and time again is people want that flexibility of, oh, I want indexers over here, or I want Tika content extraction over here and forwarding to these other nodes, et cetera, et cetera. They don't want to have to build that themselves. I also think this means we can start to take advantage of new modern libraries like Juice, et cetera, where we can use dependency injection, we can do more mocking of interfaces, et cetera. So I think there's some good work that we could do here in the Solr 5 time frame to really make that easier for all of you guys to really focus in on the key areas where you want to contribute without having necessarily to always have the big picture in mind around how does this whole thing work when it comes together. All right, we're in Europe. I'm a big soccer fan. I thought I've got to have a soccer reference, especially when we're at a soccer stadium. One of the things I like to think about a lot, and again, if you were at my talk yesterday, you heard me reflect this, is there's a lot of different ways that people want to score their search results, right? And so here's the bicycle kick. That's one way. There's headers, there's straight on regular shots, all of that good stuff. I want you all to think about how can I incorporate more scoring features into the way I do search. So things like TF-IDF, et cetera, or even the other scoring models that we have, those are all well and good, but by most accounts, like if you listen to the Googles or the Bings, et cetera, they usually get you about 60 to 70, maybe as high as 80% of your score, right? If you look at internet search, most people estimate that they use somewhere between 500 to 1,000 different features to score their content. So when you go and do a search, it may be things like, what does your social network look like? What did you do yesterday? What did you do last week? What are your friends doing? What have you rated, reviewed? All of those things are scoring features. I think we need to make it even easier than it is already to add in those kinds of scoring features. We've got a lot of capabilities there already, things like function queries, et cetera. How do we integrate more deeply with other systems? How do we make it easier for you guys to incorporate the things that matter to your business into your scoring relevance? Because a lot of times we see this time and time again when I'm on site with customers. If you have your own custom things, you often do it post-search. And usually what then happens is you've got to overfetch content and then bring it back, and that's not as efficient as if you can represent your scoring model in the engine itself and let it do what it's good at. Because again, what search is really, really good at is those top-end problems. It's really, really good at ranking things. So how can we make it easier for you to factor in the things that you care about in terms of ranking? I think this also goes on to also doing things like making it easier for you to update fields. We often get questions around how do I update this field without re-indexing the document. I think there's some good work going on in that space already, so hopefully, fingers crossed, you will see that sometime in the near future. And I believe there is even a branch that has started work on this. I don't know what the state of that branch is right now, but if that's something you care about, then please go check that out on the dev mailing list. Number 4, I think Solr needs to be more pluggable. Now, when I showed this to a few people in previews, they said, what do you mean more pluggable? It's already too pluggable. There's too many places to extend Solr. And I'm like, yes, that's the case, but I don't really mean more pluggable in that sense. I want to make it easier for you to add plugins. We have this really great, if you haven't checked it out in Solr 4, there's this really great new Solr UI that allows you to control a lot of the capabilities of Solr. Wouldn't it be great if you could just have like a Hadoop job jar, if you will, that contained all the information about your plugin that needed? You could go and just upload that either via REST API or via the UI. That plugin gets distributed across your cluster and installed and churned on when you're ready to have it churned on. You don't have to go in and restart things. You don't have to go in and edit Solr config or any of that kind of stuff. You can just configure it via APIs or even just via the definition of that plugin itself. So not that like I said, it's not about making there more plugin points. It's about making it easier for you to install and run those plugins. Number 3, hopefully you can read this, or you don't even really need to read this. This is code. I'm always told you're not supposed to show code during a talk, but I'm going to show you code. This is not something you really need to read about. The point of this code is that it needs to be more programmatically controllable. Steve Rowe and a number of other people have been working on this already. We've added schema APIs, for instance, so you can programmatically set up your schema. You don't have to worry about the XML, et cetera. We're also at Lucid investing very heavily in doing that on the Solr config side. I think basically what should happen over the long run, XML is very rich and capable of showing a lot of handling a lot of hierarchical situations, et cetera, when it comes to setting up and configuring your instance. I think all of that stuff should also be programmatically controllable, such that XML just becomes an implementation detail underneath the hood. We, of course, want to make sure we can help people migrate up from all of that, but you, of course, should be able to programmatically control that, and I think you will be seeing that coming, and maybe not the next release, but probably the one after that, where you've got a lot of those capabilities. So go check that out on Trunk already. Number 2, Solr Cloud. We are investing very, very heavily in Solr Cloud. We have already. We've got a number of customers who have repeatedly benchmarked us against other search systems, showing time and time again that Solr is linearly scalable. I'll just let that sink in a little bit. Linearly scalable is a really important thing when it comes to all of this stuff. But it's not just enough to be linearly scalable. You also need to be able to manage all of that cluster at very, very large scales. So we've got a number of people working very heavily on this. I think you've already seen, if you follow Trunk development, you're seeing things like split by query come in. So we added shard splitting earlier where you could basically split shards. Now you'll be able to split by query. You'll be able to provide your own user versioning. You'll be able to provide your own custom split ranges. So if you want to change how the hash rings look like, you'll be able to do all of that. We'll be able to have better support for cross data center stuff. People are doing cross data center today. We want to make that easier. We're also working very heavily right now on efficient deep paging. What is deep paging? That's basically, you know, when your QA team goes and presses the last button on your on the number of results you have. In the past with Lucene, and this is a Lucene issue that needs to be exposed in Solr, what would happen is Lucene would allocate this really large priority queue and wouldn't take advantage of the fact that it already knew it had to go very deep in the results. And so you would get out of memory errors when you tried to go to the millionth result or anything like that. The underpinnings are there. We need to expose this to users. You'll see this probably in the next, I don't know, 6 to 7 weeks, 10 weeks, somewhere in that time frame. The key to that thing really, though, is that really allows you to use your large-scale distributed cloud as a NoSQL engine and really blow the doors off of that kind of capabilities. We're also investing very heavily in more scalable Zookeeper operations such that as you get really, really large clusters, make sure that Zookeeper can keep up with that in terms of the size of the configurations, et cetera, that we're keeping in Zookeeper. We're also being smarter about how we load those configuration files because, again, if you have lots and lots of cores, which I talked about at number 10, and you bring them into a really, really large cluster that is managing all of those cores, you've got to make sure you do that efficiently. There's a lot of Solr issues already open on this, and you'll see a lot of investment from guys that work with us at LucidWorks around this, and hopefully you guys can also be a part of that. And I think the last part of that is really proving this out at very, very large scales. So for instance, I know in talking with Mark Miller, they've been doing upwards of thousands of nodes. We've got customers in the hundreds and thousands of range. I really want to take that and set a benchmark at least an order of magnitude bigger than that. We have clients now who we're working for who are looking at 10,000 plus nodes deployments. As they say in the old country, that's a lot of nodes, right? So how do we make sure that's really effectively tested? How do we make sure we're really effectively scaling there? And how do we manage all of that? That's all investments we're making as a company, and I hope you guys will all reap the benefits, but I hope you also will be a part of that story and part of talking about how we do those things and part of the testing out and proving that out. Number 1, all right, this is the cheesy part. It's all about you. 10 key features, 10 key things to Solr's future. This is all about you, but I want to take a moment to talk about why this is different and why this matters. So, as you all know, Solr is done at the Apache Software Foundation. We at LucidWorks, of course, for our marketing purposes, we love to put out that we employ a lot of the committers, et cetera. But at the end of the day, Solr and Lucene are part of the Apache Software Foundation. There's a lot of great investments from a lot of different companies, individuals, et cetera, showing up day in, day out, moving this project forward. If you think back to where we were even a year ago, without the help of all of you people, et cetera, we wouldn't be where we are today. We wouldn't have Solr Cloud in the state it's at. We wouldn't have these great analytics contributions that we have, that we just recently got. We wouldn't be making these investments to really test this out at large scale. And so one of the things I often get asked is, well, how the heck do I contribute? How do I become a committer? And I just want to share with you a little bit that it's not that hard, actually. People sometimes get scared off about how do I contribute to open source. Really, at the end of the day, you need to show up, and you need to show up consistently, right? You need to write patches, and you need to post them to Jira, and I'll give you links on how to do all of this stuff. And then you need to take feedback from the community and iterate on those patches, just like you would do on your home day job, right? So this process usually takes, if you really want to be a committer, if you do this for somewhere between 3 and 6 months, you'll be made a committer, because we watch who's doing what in the community. We say this guy consistently, or this woman consistently shows up, is contributing, and is reasonable to work with, and therefore is moving the project forward. And I think that's really, really important, because one of the things I think we pride ourselves, if I put my Apache hat on for a moment, is that we do open development. In my mind, it's not enough just to do open source. You can go to SourceForge, you can go to GitHub, anybody can throw up code and slap on a license from it. That's all well understood. It's a whole nother thing to do open development. It's a whole nother thing to stand up and be part of a community, do the mailing list thing, watch the sausage being made, as they like to say, be a part of the sometimes when it's really, really fantastic and sometimes when it's really, really hard, and be part of that process and understand what it means to contribute to that. And I believe that is the real power of you and volunteers here who contribute to this project, as opposed to, like I said, just slapping a license on it and calling open source and never taking any requests from the community as far as how to move this forward. So that's my spiel on you as a community. The key thing, the other thing with that is it's really all about baby steps. A lot of people come in and try to make contributions that change, 30, 40, 50 class files, etc. This stuff is about evolution. Start small and then gain confidence and grow from there. And so with that, I'm going to leave you with 2 links on how to contribute. Basically, how to set up patches, how to run our environment, how to download the code, all of those kinds of things, so that you too can start to add to this story. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions from the audience. This is not Stump the Chump, though. I'll defer to Haas if he's even woken up from last night. Any questions? The other thing I would encourage you, if you want to tweet me, I'm at gsingers, and give me your feedback. These, of course, are my ideas and what we're investing at the company. So if you disagree or agree, then feel free to tell me so. That's part of being a part of this community. Any questions? Can we get a microphone back there? It's either that or I'm going to make you do exercise again. There we go.
I'm wondering, as we try and scale Solr Cloud, if there's been any thought put into, I know that Solr tries to be agnostic as to which web container, but if there's been any thought to having a asynchronous version. Right now it uses a synchronous web server model,
right?
And so it could potentially run into threads if you have many proxy connections to other Solr Cloud servers.
Correct. So with Solr 5, we've actually already, I don't know what the final result of this will be. That's still up to the community to decide, but I know we've de-warred the Solr distribution such that it'll be easier to plug it into other kinds of containers. So if you want to use Netty or one of those kinds of things, I think that's the goal, is to be able to deploy it into different kinds of things there and make distributions that way.
But I mean, you're using Jetty now, and Jetty has supported asynchronous web servers for quite a while.
And that's an option as well, right? I should say, people ask us, we're using Jetty now, but a lot of people don't necessarily deploy Solr into Jetty, right? They deploy into Tomcat, et cetera. So yeah, there's no reason that I see that why we shouldn't support those kinds of things. And so that would be a great contribution as well. Any other questions? All right. Well, that's very good. I thank you for your time, and hopefully, like I said, you'll be a part of this community, and hopefully these ideas will resonate with you and join the discussion. Thank you very much.